All right, so yeah, so that was a second song on Power of Three. And a couple of things about that, like in the guitar playing side. But Eddie and Jamie, maybe Eric will kind of recognize this. There's a lot of MYRA MAINS shout-outs in that song that are kind of hidden.
Yes.
There's a saying, you got to take the music past where you found it.
That's right.
Right? And so, since I was making an album that was kind of like me getting my first guitar, actually the first time I ever came into my music, I went in that room and I didn't know how to turn on an amp, I didn't know how to work an amp or anything like that. There was a guy that worked here named Rob Lawson. And we went in that room and he had to come in here because I turned on the amp and somebody had turned it all the way up and it got all this crazy feedback. And he comes in and he's like, "What are you doing, man?" And I was like, I thought I was in trouble. So I'm like a little kid. So there's a couple of things. Check this out. The end solo right there. The next part. That comes from an old Insanity song called Season of Evil. Now we were 14. And that riff went, if I can remember. But no, that's not. So that's what I was thinking there. I'll play it again, because I haven't played that in a long time. Anybody remember? I know you remember that. We had a tape
Yes.
that we sold to everybody at school. Those was the good old days. So that's where that one comes from. The next lick goes. That comes from a MYRA MAINS song called Fish Out of Water.
Yeah.
And the main riff of that. My favorite riffs I ever came up with, and some of that song.
Fish out of water.
Yeah. Anyway, that's some of the riffs of that one. But I took that as kind of nods.
Yes.
To little Monte. And then the last one. That was a lick that I used to play. Our first MYRA MAINS gig was at the Hastings parking lot. Who remembers that?
Yeah.
It was like June 21st, 1990, I think. Right? At 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm just making that up. I don't know. It was something like that. My mom knows. And the way I came up with that is sometimes you play with this, you know, your scales and your chords. But sometimes I just look at shapes, because if you do play, or if you've ever noticed this, a lot of things on guitars are triangles, shapes. Like I'm in a different tuning. It would be a D major. I look at that as a triangle, right? Now here's a D7. Same thing, right? So I took this lick. I mean, normally you would go. Sorry, I got the sun like making a reflection. So what I did is I just took the scale of what I knew and just raised a note to where they work, and then it sounded kind of happy. I think in music you have 3 types of chords. You have major chords, you have minor chords, you have dominant chords. The major chords are kind of the happiest sounding chords, right? The minor chords, those are the sad chords, the scary chords. And dominant chords are the, whatever you want to think, bluesy or Beatlesy, however you want to think of it. And so I just kind of combined all those things together. So that's where that last solo comes from.
Yeah.
The tapping. Just kind of classic guitar shred tapping. Sometimes in music, less is more. And yeah, so any questions? Okay, yes, sir.
What was your main influences when you were 19 for a 14-year-old Monte, when you were learning all this? Who did you listen to?
14-year-old Monte. The influences always change for me. Back then, like when I got my first guitar, I tell people like the bands like Metallica and Slayer and Testament, Megadeth, Anthrax, they were all just coming out. Now think about all that being fresh. None of that existed before.
Right.
And every time there's a new genre of music, it's when things, or, you know, when something takes off, it seems to be that it's all these things that maybe didn't go together, or just combining 2 styles. It was thrash metal, which is pretty much taking like progressive rock of the 70s mixed with punk rock. If you took the speed and intensity of, you know, of a punk rock band, and then you had the technicality of a, you know, any kind of like 70s progressive band or something, and they just put those things together. And what that really comes from is just what you're influenced by. Like for me, like I love Slayer and I love Ray LaMontagne equally. You know, I love acoustic stuff and I love electric stuff. And I think that kind of comes from just being a guitar player. Because, you know, I love cranking up the amp to where you feel your jeans move. And I know all my band members love when I do that. Chris Sheehan says he has hearing loss because of me. I think he does. Because we practiced in this huge building. They had small rooms, but we chose to have the big room. So we had to like crank up all the way. Chris could never hear himself, so he'll never let me let him down. Anyhow, yes.
How far a day when you were younger did you practice to be able to shred like that?
It was about 8 hours a day. I would come home from school and I would just practice. That's all I wanted to do. This is all I've ever wanted to do. I wish that I would have done something else. So you kids, if you know, take some guitar lessons and learn how to do something, but still have a job, okay? Because you may go on tour, but then you're home from being on tour. And it could take a long time to get things rolling again. Life always balances itself out, one way or another. I always say Mother Nature always takes care of itself. But 8 hours a day, I was one of those kids, you know, I'd fall asleep you know, with the guitar, you know, it was just always attached to me. And, and you know, I had, you know, the best guitar teacher that exists. I mean, he used to teach right over there in that room. He's across the street now. It's Robert Browning. I know you're all down with some Robert Browning. Best guitar player in the whole world. And yeah, I would, you know, my parents, they would know if I was playing. And so they'd come and tell me to turn it down. And so I would just wait until I thought they went to sleep. And then, you know, I'd lay there going, you know, all that. But then they come in, Monte, turn it down. All the time. So those are some influences. I mean, and also another thing, you had Metallica, you had all those bands, and that was fresh, and it was fun to play. Okay, I don't know a lot of funk stuff, and I know that it's good, but it was never fun to play. It's a lot of fun to play on the bass or something like that because there's a lot going on. But the guitars would just be like kind of one note because that's what it needs to do. But like all the metal stuff was just, you know, all over, and it's fun. And then, like being a kid, you would, you know, the you know, parents and older people were like, how do you play that thrash music, that acid rock, that devil's music? And I'm just like, it's so angry, and how do you? That just makes me. I was like, really? It seems like fun. It's like a roller coaster. You don't go on the Shockwave at Six Flags, or maybe now. You don't go on the, you know, on a ride and just get mad. It's fun, right? So that's how I kind of looked at it all.